Okay, thank you for coming. I feel I'm going to try not to shout over the noise because I think you can all hear me, which is great. And well done for making it into the post-production corner here. I'm Dave Cook. I'm CG Supervisor. I'm here from BlueBolt today. BlueBolt is a medium-sized visual effects company based here in London. We're working on shows such as Mission Impossible, Nosferatu, and of course Downton Abbey. And for those of you who are not familiar with Downton Abbey, a show very beloved of UK viewers, it's a period drama set in the early years of the last century, which focuses on the lives of the very rich and their servants and their sort of elegant lifestyle. So we are recreating the 1930s Splendour of Piccadilly Circus for the opening shot, a sort of a long tracking shot, possibly between 2 and 3 minutes long itself, and the climactic race sequence of Royal Ascot, where all the characters, the king and so on, are watching one of the fine races there. Okay, so we have to, in our minds, envision how evening is falling in the West End in Theatreland. We are trying to establish the beautiful life of mid-century glamour and theatre going that was part of the West End at that time. So this opening shot has obviously got several aims in mind. It's got to establish the location of Piccadilly Circus in the West End. We're trying to establish the time, the period, and also the atmosphere. So this is always key when we're creating any kind of shot, is to understand fundamentally the creative objectives of the director and the DOP, and then also to build that mechanism with photoreal elements to combine the plates and our CG to try and establish that kind of element of performance that brings the whole show to life. So this, sorry this isn't a bigger screen, but you can see here a sort of a rough layout of all the different processes that are involved in our visual effects post-production world. So on the left-hand side, the little black areas represent the shoot and the practical elements of the camera work. The red elements are the CG, the models, the animation, the layout and so on, the lighting. The blue elements represent the camera work that's done in-house to track and reassemble the shots for CG. And the green elements are the compositing, so the layering up of the different plates and elements for the final composite. So it illustrates really for me that there are a lot of simultaneous and interlocking processes and a lot of interplay between them in a complex shot like this, which is really like a sequence in miniature. Okay, so pre-shoot, we love to be involved early in the planning of a show, and in this case it was really vital that we got as early as possible so that we understood the planning necessary to recreate Piccadilly Circus and stitch together essentially 3 plates for this long tracking shot. So the idea was to walk from Eros, which is going to be our grand establishing image, across the road of Piccadilly Circus, up Shaftesbury Avenue, and into the kind of mythical Theatreland, and inside the theatre, and actually through the audience, and then onto the stage at the end. So there are 3 plates that are stitched together to make this. There's one first plate, which is shot in the Mortlake studio car park, one plate which is shot here at the Richmond Theatre, of which we are just sort of keeping the lower part of the facade, which is period correct, and then we're then integrating that into our CG model. And then there's a third plate once the camera walks into the theatre, and it goes up the stairs, and then it goes through a double doors and down onto the stage, onto the stage itself, where there's a character singing, and they are, those are the characters in the show. So here is Mortlake Studio Car Park. Some of you may be familiar with it. This is the studio itself. Obviously, on the left and on the right is this triangular car park, which was going to be our sort of location where we were going to recreate Piccadilly Circus. I got a period correct map of Piccadilly. This is from 1910. Obviously, the buildings now in Piccadilly Circus are a little different and things have moved around. Eros has moved around, but the basic layout is the same. We were fortunate to get a very nice walkthrough that the DOP did himself, going to Piccadilly Circus with just a little handheld camera, just walking through the seats. So we got a fair idea of the timing and the kind of path that he wanted for the camera to take. So in this image, you can see my early previs of the camera going around on the green path there. I've overlaid the Piccadilly Circus map and the Mortlake Studio map to size, so I get a good feel of where we are locating ourselves geographically. I've got the sort of the top right road will be Shaftesbury Avenue, and then we can see also the Mortlake Studio buildings, which are sort of practical limitations. So the blue lines are where we're going to put our blue screens, and then the practical the grey blobs are actually the cars that are going to be on set. So there were 6 cars on set, there were 50 people. Those are the little grey dots you see there. So there's a sort of there's a pre-shoot planning element here, and then we get a rough photo scan of the location. So this is the Mortlake Studio again, and we can see we've laid out our blue screen there, just for planning and measurement there. And then here we've run into a slight problem because I've obviously put Eros inside a porter cabin, and the camera is going through several sort of obstacles there which are going to be in the way. So we had to adapt our path of the camera, we'll see in a minute. And then I've also got a photo scan of the Richmond Theatre, which I've sort of popped in there to give us a destination so that the cameraman knows exactly where he's going to end up in order for the stitch of the 2 plates to work. So that there's a Steadicam operator who has to essentially match his speed when he's walking through this car park, and then on the second location when it's shot in the Richmond Theatre itself, he has to essentially match his speed and trajectory, and this sort of visualization helps him to understand how that's going to work. And then here, this is the sort of compacted layout which we ended up with as a sort of compromise. You can see I've shifted Eros a little bit to the north there so that there's a slightly shorter path. The shot is therefore a little bit pacier than it was. It was originally planned to be a very, very slow shot, and it ends up just being a kind of just a slow sort of majestic walk, but it's just slightly contracted there. And you can see roughly where the layout of the practical cars and people is going to be on the set, some of them clustered around the fountain of Eros at the beginning. So layout is what happens when all of that previs and the shoot come together, and we try and stitch it all together again and bring it back, hopefully close to how it was, how you imagined it in the pre-shoot stage. And this is how the plates looked originally. There wasn't any need for a wet down because it was actually raining on the evening, which was great because they planned to have a wet down, but we got real rain, and I think that helps the shot a lot because the actors, even though they're probably good at acting being wet, when they're really getting wet, they really behave in a different way. And we're getting lovely reflections as well on the road from the practical lights, which are set up to imitate the billboards of Shaftesbury Avenue. And obviously the period lights, the car lights on the wet tarmac. Okay, so this is a very simple recreation of how the stitched cameras work in 3D. So both of the plates are tracked. There's a little bit of retiming going on some of those plates, so that there's a little sort of adjustment to be made to make sure that the cameras line up in space and in time so that the rate of them feels natural. In the first plate we have this double-decker bus that goes across the screen, and that becomes essentially our wipe for our stitch. So we are joining the 2 plates at that point, but it's essential that obviously all the background elements and all the characters behave in a continuous way across that stitch. So we've got some very loving recreations of very famous landmarks of Piccadilly. Obviously, Eros is well famous. Every Londoner knows it, and it has to be recreated accurately. So we've We've got a very nice a sculpted model. It was a hand sculpted model. We did a bit of photo scanning, but really it didn't really create the level of detail that we were after. So we got a very committed sort of ZBrush artist to do a bit of sculpting on there for us, and obviously he hand sculpted the pose of Eros as well. So it's the sort of labour of love there. And then the buildings themselves, underneath all this, the sort of the finery of the billboards, there is a very sort of grimy London building. And we've recreated, obviously, this sort of sooty dirt texture as a very nice background for all the interactive light that we're pushing through from the billboards. And we've got a lot of ground level, street level period detail as well with the shops. We recreated the Saki and Lawrence jewellers, which was a key feature of the early, the Piccadilly of the last century. And then finally we have the Richmond Theatre, so we have sort of extracted the ground floor and the first floor facade, and then we have grafted on top of that a sort of architecturally sympathetic reconstruction that will line up with our fake Shaftesbury Avenue that we've created, and we've inserted this theatre where, you know, it was not really a theatre before, but we've patched it in to where it would be. Okay, so then. Seem to have lost the screen. Okay, right, great, we're back. Okay, so that is essentially how it looks. We've remade the pavilion, and I repopulated our layout with our high-res buildings. That's what that slide is. And then we have the addition of the neon signs, and the signs are the essential locator that gives it not only the period, but also the sort of mood and the glamour that we wanted, all those sort of starlight small signs and the combination of the different kinds of signs. So we've obviously got the very humble billboards for the newspaper vendors. We've recreated the sort of subway with its cast iron railings and a sort of very atmospheric underground sign. And then we've got the more traditional Victorian Edwardian painted wood signs, some of which are just flat, some of which have got this carved gilded wood. And then we've got the different kinds of illuminated signs, which are the most important ones for us. We've got these that are a series of incandescent bulbs laid out in a metal channel with reflective surfaces underneath, which are programmed to animate in a particular series. And then we've also, we can see one or two of them there. Obviously the Bovril building with its, which is actually obscured by Eros here, but it's got a very nice, and the Schweppes sign as well on that corner, which has a sort of cascading starlight fountain in it. And then we've also got these early neons, which are sort of a completely different kind of light. The tubes and all the supporting structures have the very continuous light, and they flash on and off in a sort of counterpoint to the very sort of granular illuminations of the incandescent bulbs. So those things, just the frames and the fittings, add a lot of detail and scale to the model. So we can see now the model is starting to look nicely detailed, and we've got a nice feeling of the street. We have added also, you can see a bit of pavement detail there. So originally the car park was flat, but we've lifted up the pedestrians onto a bit of pavement as well. We've created a curb, as that edge for the road, and we've added this traffic island with the traffic lights in it, which isn't really there. So this is a sort of a sample illumination. We've set that going. This is a Houdini-based simulation of all the different sequences of lights based on the period reference we were able to find. And this again, it's simulating a kind of a sequential neon in this case. So traffic was very important. Obviously, as busy as Piccadilly Circus is actually, it's a well-known phrase. 6 cars and 50 people, it doesn't go very far. So we've got, obviously, to add in a certain amount of bustle, and that involves adding another 26 cars and 4 buses and about 50 or 100 extra people walking in amongst the practical cars and people that we've already got. So these are our car models that we've made. We've got different variations of those, color variations and shader variations. And this is where they have to go. So obviously you can see there's a very narrow sort of squeeze as they go through the little gap between Eros and the building on the corner. And that's all choreographed very particularly here. So again, as the camera moves, it seems like everything is moving perfectly, but obviously they're all sort of moving on and off stage. They're somehow sort of avoiding each other when they're in camera, but that isn't always the case. So, and then we've got the other cars coming down Shaftesbury Avenue to turn left and do other things. Okay, very hard to get the cars to avoid the pedestrians in the plate. That was quite a lot of work. So meanwhile, let's just have a quick look at what we did for Royal Ascot as well. Royal Ascot was a massive social and sporting event back in 1930. Probably 50,000 people would attend on a regular basis. And some of them, in this case, the royal family, some of them very smartly dressed at the absolute finest on their best behavior. Our race course that we were using to shoot this was Ripon Racecourse, which is obviously a very modern race course, which has got the right kind of racetrack, but not the right kind of buildings. So we are overlaid, but you can see here the Royal Box was built as a set in front there, and we are adding to that the wider grandstand and the other buildings to form the complete picture. And then also, in terms of extras, 200 extras were filmed on the day. Obviously 200 extras doesn't really fill the whole paddock. So we've obviously got to add a mixture of 2D elements and 3D crowd to make it feel complete. And obviously we've modelled a few tents as well that are based on the practical tents that they had on the set to help populate that. So our crowd elements, we've got shoot elements from the extras. We essentially remodel that and we make our crowd agents to have a variety of costumes and accessories like these parasols and so on. And also we have to modify some of our crowd behaviours. Obviously the 1930s ladies, they are not quite as enthusiastic as the average sports fan is today, so sometimes you get slightly inappropriate animations which have to be taken down. It's very unlikely that a lady of the 1930s would raise her hands above her head in that way. And similarly, the gentlemen, they have to get excited as the race is finishing, so we have to build over the sequence gradually more and more excited animations as we get to the final thing. So this is kind of how the final frame would look. We've got the practical Royal Box, we've got our CG and matte painted extra architecture, and we've got around 25,000 extra crowd agents that fill up the frame and essentially make the whole feel like a splendid spectacle, like it would have felt in full Technicolor. So going back to Piccadilly, this is the crowd that was shot on the day. And again, just to remind us where we're now sort of right in the heart of where all the processes are integrated. So obviously introducing character animation and crowd into the very busy plate already. That requires a lot of different skills. And then we're simulating the different clothes as well of the animated walkers. And so you can see them here. They're just moving themselves into place so that they're avoiding the traffic and just making the whole scene feeling fully populated and busy. Okay. Atmosphere and The P supers of the 1930s were very thick, as you can see from this amazing image which we had as reference. Obviously, we didn't want to go as thick as that with our fog and atmos because we wouldn't see far enough along the street. You know, literally sometimes you couldn't see across the street. But we have obviously added a little bit of volumetric fog to enhance the glow from the lights. And the lighting obviously is key to this whole thing. So you can see the kind of effulgence you're getting off the signs, the kind of color palette you're getting from the neons. And that's something we tried to play with, the sort of the warmth of the color temperature of those sort of red and orange neons against a sort of a cooler backdrop of the sky to try and, you know, bring out that kind of intimate atmosphere of the West End at the time. Very, you know, it's a very sensitive, we're very sensitive to color, and certainly period color. So we sort of expect the past to look like the colors in which it was filmed, if you see what I mean. And we're sort of trying to balance that with our sort of realistic color temperatures that we'd normally introduce into a photoreal environment. And again, we're very fortunate to have that natural wet down and reflection, but we're also introducing extra elements of reflection on the ground to try and give us more, those nice sort of ground reflections to integrate our cars and our people. So here you can see a rough sort of screen grab from Maya of how the lights are set up. There's obviously point lights on the cars and on the street, and there's a bunch of area lights for each of the billboards, plus the actual animated billboards, which are sort of incandescent luminosity animations. So there's a real mixture of lighting styles. Very helpful. We use Arnold for our rendering, and the global light sampling on Arnold was very helpful. Okay, this has been that's how the finished CG frame looks. And you can see there we've got the sort of the full elements there. We've got all of the different things that I've talked about. But let's have a little bit of a look at the breakdown now and see it all, how it comes together in the final composite. great. Well, thanks once again for coming. Okay. I don't think there's time for questions, but I'm here if you want to, just come. That's great. Thank you.